Welcome, everyone, to Tuesday Night Luke Live Online. I'm Father James DeLuzio with the Paulist Fathers, and tonight our pericope is Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 56. Picks up right where we left off last week. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee to the pagan territory, the area of the Gerasenes, and he dispelled the legion of demons in this poor man who was running naked among the tombs. And the demons came out of the man down into the swine and down the hill and into the river and were drowned. So we pick up right from there in in verse 40, when Luke tells us, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they had been waiting for him. And a man named Jairus, an official of the synagogue, came forward. He fell at the feet of Jesus and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. As he went, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years, who had spent her whole livelihood on doctors and was unable to be cured by anyone, came up behind him and touched the tassel of his cloak. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. Jesus then asked, "Who touched me?" While all were denying it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are pushing and pressing in upon you." But Jesus said, "Someone has touched me. I know, for power has gone out from me." When the woman realized she had not escaped notice, she came forward trembling. Falling down before him, she explained in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you." While he was still speaking to her, someone from the official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer." When he heard this, Jesus answered him, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith, and she will be saved." When he arrived at the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except for Peter and John and James and the child's father and mother. All were weeping and mourning for her when he said, "Do not weep any longer, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him because they knew she was dead. But he took her by the hand and called to her, "Child, arise." Her breath returned, and she immediately arose. He then directed that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, and he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. The Gospel of the Lord. Powerful, aren't they? Some of the most powerful episodes in Jesus's miraculous endeavors? Well, a couple of things for a brief commentary. I know you'd like one. We see the connection of life being restored to the young as well as the old. It's very, very intentional that Luke has brought these together. So has Mark, so has Matthew. And so as a result, it's very likely that these in fact did happen on the same day in the same context of the crowds pushing and pressing in upon Jesus. It's remarkable that the crowds first had been waiting for him, especially because it was known if he went to the other side of the lake, he was in the pagan territory. In some ways, he would have been considered unclean. But at this point, people don't care. They want Jesus, and they want to hear him. They want to be healed by him. And then, remarkable of all, an official of the synagogue, he comes forward. So at first we anticipate danger, but he falls at Jesus' feet. And in that real sense, he's willing to go beyond the limits of his tradition and his faith to trust that Jesus is the one who is to come. And so Jesus does go with him, and then the crowd pressing, and then we have the elderly woman. We don't know how old she is, other than she's been suffering from hemorrhages, so actually she's probably not too old, because she's still having a lot of blood flow. And she, in her desperation, knows she shouldn't be in the crowd. She's definitely unclean, right? But she's risking everything. She's risking being identified. Other people know. The doctors know her. She's been to all the doctors her whole livelihood, so she's known. But I guess, in a sense, the great crowd is making her incognito. So many people. But she dares to touch the cloak, the tassel of Jesus' cloak. And then that powerful statement that he knows that power has gone from him. Which is a recognition of Jesus' unity with God and the power of the Holy Spirit which they share, that Jesus knows it's been taken, not taken from him as if it's no longer there, but some of it has been extracted. He says, power has gone from me. And then the beautiful statement, which he says many times, her faith has saved her. He doesn't say, I have saved you. He doesn't say, in this particular case, God has come down and visited you, although all those things are very similar. He says her faith. So in both cases, Jairus and this woman are making statements of faith in Jesus. And it's as if the power of God and the healing of the Holy Spirit is just flowing out. And here we have two people who say, yes, I'm taking it. So it's extraordinary and very, very moving. It also gives us hope in terms of the power of faith. The last point that's significant is that the crowd around in the house know that the child is dead, but Jesus insists. He says, do not weep any longer. She's sleeping. And this is a real invitation to all of us in the deaths we encounter, that Christ has revealed that death is a form of sleep, and we will dead awaken, all in God's time, in the promises of Christ, and the death brings us outside of time, the particular judgment, and then ultimately the final judgment when everything is renewed in the new earth, the new heaven and the new earth. It's an astounding statement, yet it can be taken so very literally and so profoundly spiritual. Death is a mere sleep. We are not to be afraid. And then we have almost the comical thing of once the child returns, the breath returns to her. The Holy Spirit is the breath of God, returns to her. She gets up immediately. He directs her that she should be getting something to eat. The deep reality that in this world, food is a necessity. Her body needs to be replenished now that her spirit has been restored. And then telling the parents to tell no one what had happened, it does seem an odd request since everyone knew she was dead. But he would much rather them start thinking more, oh, well, maybe she really was in a deep sleep. He doesn't want the attention brought to him. Time and time again, he does not want celebrity. This goes back to his temptations. We're really to take on guard for all the temptations and drawbacks of celebrity, of any and every kind, but particularly for Jesus, because he wants people to ponder. And here he wants them to ponder how death is but a sleep. And this was very important because within that 200 years prior to Jesus' arrival, Judaism was articulating more and more a belief in the resurrection of the dead. And although it was considered relatively new, it still was harking back to something that humanity has called for, who has called upon, has dreamed about, has wished for from the earliest time of our coming into consciousness in this world. And I mean, the great epics of Gilgamesh, it starts out who wants to live forever. And it's such an innate longing that, again, it's something that's part of the creation of the human being, and Jesus is there to confirm that. So he wants them to think about that, not that, oh, let's go back to this fate healer, isn't he so marvelous? So those are just some of the commentaries. Of course, you can find dozens and dozens more. So I hope I've piqued your interest to contemplate this. By all means, comments, questions you might have. One of my favorite passages. So I was happy to share it with you tonight. Have a wonderful week. God bless you, and sleep well. Good night, everybody. Oop. There we go.